Hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video I'll be giving you my NRL Round 1 predictions. So in terms of how this is going to go, these will typically be done a little bit early in the week, more like a Tuesday or Wednesday, but I'll be going through the team lists that have been announced for the games in Las Vegas for this weekend, and then just talk generally about the teams that are playing next week. But yeah, let's crack on, and let's see if we can get 8 out of 8 for this week and next week. Kicking off round 1 of the NRL, we have the Seagulls versus Rabbitohs. Starting with the team list that we have here. The Seagulls, in the backs, they'll have Tom Trbojevic, Jason Saab, Tolu Kula, Ruben Garrick, Jackson Barlow, Luke Brooks, and Daly Cherry-Evans. In the forwards, they'll have Taniela Paseka, Lachlan Croker, Josh Aloiai, Hamal Olakawatu, Ben Trbojevic, and Jake Trbojevic. On the bench is Carl Lawton, Corey Waddell, Ethan Bullymore, and Nathan Brown. Looking at the side of the Rabbitohs, in the backs, they have Latrell Mitchell, Alex Johnston, Isaiah Tass, Richard Kenner, Jacob Gagai, Cody Walker, and Lachlan Ilias. In the forwards, they have Tavita Totola, Damien Cook, Sean Kepi, Kian Kalamatangi, Jai Arrow, and Cameron Murray. And on the bench is Saliva Havili, Jacob Host, David Mwale, and Tom Burgess. The first thing that I want to cover for the Seagulls is that I really like this team. I really do like this team. I'm one that likes to talk about spines a lot, and for me this spine looks pretty good. So of course the big question mark, and there's 2 big question marks for this entire Seagulls team. The first one is Luke Brooks. Pretty obvious. What kind of Luke Brooks are we going to get? A few things to keep in mind. First of all, when he was out towards the middle of last season, it was either an injury or suspension, I can't remember which one. But he came back, and that was at a period where people might remember the West Tigers started competing with people. Now, it wasn't bringing them off the bottom, they weren't always winning, but they were competing. And I don't just mean around like the Dragons, but it was teams around them, teams in the midfield, and teams in the top 8 and top 4. They were putting in competitive performances, and that charge was led by Luke Brooks when he returned from that spell out. So that's one positive for him. And the thing is, when you're in a poor system, as much as you might be an elite superstar, if the system's poor, there's only so much that you can do as an individual to elevate a team. But I think having Tom Trbojevic in there, who's an incredibly skillful and intelligent fullback, that's going to do him the world of good. And not only that, but he's got Daly Cherry-Evans. You don't get much better in the NRL. He's top, just playing it purely safe, top 5 in the NRL of game managers. That's playing it safe. He is top 3, but just depends on your biases and all that kind of stuff. But to play it safe, he's top 5, but definitely top 3. So you've got him there to help you out. And then Lachlan Croker is probably one of the most underrated hookers in the league. Maybe not the most underrated, but he's not really talked about that much given the rest of the players in this squad. So he's the first question mark. So you have Trbojevic, who's going to help and support. Daly Cherry-Evans will take on the kicking game and game management. Luke Brooks can hopefully just fly and just do his thing. The second question mark for me is Ruben Garrick. Not necessarily as a player. I think he's extremely reliable. I really do like him. I think he's brilliant. Just as a centre, that's the only question mark for me, is that transition. You know, I'm always sometimes worried and or curious about how things are going to go. Like, I don't like seeing fullbacks transition to wing because I feel like it takes away their creativity as an individual. But I think Ruben Garrick is a reliable player. I think he'll do a decent job there. But it's whether he's the type of player that can elevate a team on the edge. So you take a few examples, like Tony Staggs is one, Herbie Farnworth is another, Justin Olam is a third. Can he be that level of centre? You know, it's a completely different ball game because as a finisher, he's great. He receives a ball from his centre and he finishes 9 out of 10 times. He's fantastic. But as being the one that has to create from nothing, can he do that? That's a big question mark for me. Kula on the opposite side, I think he'll do just fine. But Ruben Garrett's a question mark, but I do think he's a professional and in time he'll only get better throughout the season. But 2 question marks on the side of the Rabbitohs for me. The first is the partnership of Kenner and Gagai. How's it going to go? I don't know enough about these guys, so you guys would have to educate me, or you guys will just know whatever you know. But I don't know enough about those two. I don't know their experience. I know Dane Gagai, but I don't know Jacob Gagai. So that's my lack of experience on that. But the question mark that I do know a bit more about is Lachlan Ilias. Over the last couple of years, he has not been a number 7 to elevate this team. Maybe it's the style of play that doesn't really suit him, but there's not really too much you can do individually. I've not seen an incredible kicking game from him. I don't see a great running game from him. I think a lot of the times he can just pop that ball off to Kalamatangi or Campbell Graham and they will just kind of do the rest, because individually they're quality players. But the only time, and I'll always go back to this, the only time I've seen Ilias lead a team and lead by example is for Greece at the Rugby League World Cup. That is it. So, to stop waffling on about these teams now, I think the forward pack will be a pretty even battle. The Rabbitohs are usually pretty good in that regard, and they've even got Moale and Burgess on the bench, so that's not a bad sign. I think the Rabbitohs might lead through the middle, but I think huge players like Paseka and experienced players like Aloe could deal with that fairly well. So we'll have to kind of see how that goes, but I think the forward battle leans towards the Rabbitohs. But I think in terms of the quality created from the backs, I think the Seagulls have got this one. So even though the Rabbitohs are favourites, I'm going to go with Seagulls to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Roosters versus the Broncos in Las Vegas. Also, starting with the team lists in the backs for the Roosters, they have James Tedesco, Daniel Tupou, Billy Smith, Joey Manu, Joseph Suwali, Luke Keary and Sam Walker. In the forwards, they have Spencer Leniu, Brandon Smith, Lindsay Collins, Siwa Wong, Setili Tuapanua. I'm going to hazard a guess that's how you pronounce it, but educate me if I'm wrong. And Victor Radley at 13. On the bench is Sandon Smith, Naufahu White, Nat Butcher, and Terrell May. Definitely mess some of those up. But moving on to the Broncos now. In the backs, they have Reece Walsh, Jesse Arthurs, Katoni Staggs, Selwyn Cobbo, and Dane Mariner, Ezra Mam, and Adam Reynolds. In the forwards, they have Corey Jensen, Billy Walters, Payne Haas, Brendan Piacora, Jordan Rickey, and Patrick Carrigan. And on the bench is Tyson Smoothie, Fletcher Baker, Kobe Hetherington, and Xavier Willison. Some interesting lineups there. Most of the changes coming on the side of the Broncos, so a couple question marks, but we'll start with the Roosters. The first question mark there for me is obviously going to be James Tedesco. There was a lot of criticism about him, especially the first half of last season, but the point where it all kind of turned around from him was the third Origin game. He was reliable, he was creative, he was the dependable James Tedesco that we know, and he is going to be instantly criticised the moment there's any kind of mistake. Even if the Roosters just lose this and they have a decent game, he's going to get criticism. They'll just say Tedesco washed. He is getting on a bit, there's no denying that, but at his best, James Tedesco can be a world-class player. Simple as that. Other potential question marks would be Billy Smith at centre. If I'm not mistaken, it is the same person that was a second rower. I'm pretty sure he is the same guy. I'm not confusing him with someone else that ended up transitioning to centre. And he was incredibly reliable. I honestly wasn't expecting it. I wasn't familiar with your game. But he was pretty reliable at centre. Now, we know what Joey Manu can do at centre. And I think that is his best position. I don't think he's quite a fullback yet, if I'm completely honest. So, he can be effective there. Luke Keary and Sam Walker, it is the best pairing they've got. I know they experimented a bit. Sam Walker was unavailable for some weeks. He was dropped for a few weeks as well. That just is the best partnership they've got. I think there was all sorts of issues with that Roosters team, and it was just kind of all put on Sam Walker. I think he's a really intelligent player. He's still extremely young. I know he's early 20s, at least. But I think he's a decent player that can actually evolve and just get better over time. And Luke Keary's a class act. The forwards for me look as solid as ever. Brandon Smith's also a question mark. We'll see how he sort of fits into this team and develops. But on paper, the Roosters squad looks really good. And I think, towards the back end of last season, we saw that they fixed a lot of issues. Brandon Smith became more comfortable in that system, and everyone sort of understood his style a little bit more as things went on. But I'm expecting a really strong Roosters team here. Of course, a few question marks on the side of the Broncos. First of all, Selwyn Cobbo being a centre. Same thing as I said about Ruben Garrick is, he's extremely reliable. I'd say more skillful on the ball than Garrick. But in the same vein, that transition to centre, how's it going to go? Can he be like what Herbie Farnworth was? I think it's a fair question to ask. I think he can be. We have seen that it's incredibly difficult on the wing for a player to somehow take one step towards the touchline and go. Yet he seems to be able to do it. He's got that quick step in him. He's got the skill to do it. Selwyn Cobbo can create things from nothing. So I don't think there's too much to worry about there, but we will just have to see how that transition goes and whether he can just get used to it and adapt to it as soon as possible. Ezra Mam is going to be looking to hit the ground running. The way he finished his grand final last year was incredible. Adam Reynolds, I've got no issues for him. Aside from, I just hope he has a fully healthy season. I would just like him to be available the entire year because he seems to pick up a knock nearly every single week. But if he can get a full season completely fit, that would be great. I think losing... Oh no, what's his name? What's the forward that went to the Dolphins? Oh no, what's his name? You guys know who I'm talking about. I can't believe I forgot his name. But you guys know exactly who I'm talking about. The forward from the Broncos that's gone to the Dolphins. It'll come to me. He's going to be a big miss. What's his name? He's going to be a huge miss. That's going to bug me so much. But you look at the second rows that they got, like Piacora and Ricky. They can also create opportunities from nothing. And Carrigan, of course, one of the best locks in the NRL, is going to be... Just on paper, that team is incredible. And the bench that they've got is normally really reliable as well. Smoothie's reliable, Baker's reliable, Hetherington, Willison, I don't actually know too much about. But I'm pretty happy with that team. I'm pretty happy. If only I could remember that guy's name. It is bugging the hell out of me so much. I'm going to have to Google it. Flegler. Oh my god. How did I not remember Flegler? Hyped him up so much last year. I've forgotten his name already. Tom Flegler. That's the one. Score predictions. Let's get on with it. I'm going to go with the Broncos to win 1 to 12 points. So next up we have the Knights versus the Raiders. The Raiders are going to be a big question mark for me this season. How they managed to stay in the top 8 last season, I will never know. Like, an entire half of their season was just completely abysmal. And somehow they stayed in the top 8. Whether they've got the squad to do that again, I don't think so. And against this Knights team, the depth that the Knights have got is insane. So, you look at the team last season, Kalen Ponga started out in the number 6 position, but they struggled and eventually went on I want to say it was a 10-game win streak. I kind of want to say it was 12. 10, 11 or 12 game win streak. It was insane. They were brilliant. Ponga had moved to number 1. Tyson Gamble at 6, I think, was incredibly underrated. Jackson Hastings at 7, and then Phoenix Crosland at 9. It was a fantastic team. It was brilliant. Not only that, they've now added Kai Pearce-Paul into the mix, and he's competing for a spot in second row. I, as a, Super League spectator, didn't particularly care too much for his game. He's a good young player, but whether he's like top NRL quality, I couldn't really tell you because I just didn't really pay attention to his game. Will Price, however, where the hell does he fit in? For me, it's a little bit disappointing because, repeating the same question, where does he fit in? I want to see him thrive in this team. But he's not replacing Ponga. I see no reason to replace Gamble. And there's no need to replace Hastings, who I think is still there. I need to have another look at the players in and out, but I think he's still there. And he's not a hooker. And I've seen some people talk about putting him in the reserves, getting him some more minutes, and just seeing how it goes. I don't want him wasted at centre, even though I understand that pretty much when you've got a utility player that needs to be thrown into the mix, centre's usually where they go. Maybe make him the utility on the bench, make him play hooker, let him learn that position, get another tool in the tool belt, so to speak. But the depth that the Knights have now got is incredible. That team for me is still extremely strong, and I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to compete with this team at all. The Knights will still be shaky. They have had their shaky moments, but it's about hitting the ground running with consistency. And we'll see how they go for the rest of the season, but for me, the Knights are overwhelmingly favourites in this one, so I'm going to take the Knights to win 13+. Next up, we have the Warriors versus the Sharks. This is going to be a really exciting battle between one team that kind of shocked everybody last year. You know, looking at players like Metcalf, you'd never sort of think, well, you know, you got Sean Johnson, you can make something happen, but then who's this Metcalf guy? Was anyone expecting that massive step up from Chance Nickel-Klokstad? Like, were we really expecting to see these kinds of things? Honestly, from my personal perspective, no. I wasn't expecting that. I knew that Sean Johnson was a fantastic player, but he'd kind of dropped off the face of the earth for a bit. So that Warriors team, it just has a real good feel around it. You know, ever since being able to actually play home games, getting the community involved, there's just a really good feeling around the Warriors. Looking at the Sharks, however, typically a pretty strong defensive team. Last season was not as good as the season before. I think the season before they were a top 4 defensive outfit. Maybe top 3 or 2. Last season, I think it was still top 8 defensively, but definitely not as good. There was a big drop off, and they were unreliable at times. I think, well, first of all, I'm hoping for another big year from Metcalf at number 6 for the Warriors. I also think for the Sharks, the biggest focal point for me is not Nico Hines, because he gets hyped up year in, year out. You know, rightly so, I get it. I completely understand the hype. Kennedy got a little bit of the hype last year, but for me, the really exciting part of this Sharks team is Braden Trindle, because he got very few opportunities last year, and I thought took every single one of them extremely well. And just a side note on this game, and after this side note, I'll get straight into my prediction. The side note is Braden Trindle, for me, is probably the next in line, from what I can tell, and you might have to remind me of someone else, next in line to replace Cherry Evans as the number 7 for Queensland when he's done. Because in terms of his kicking game, he's extremely reliable. I think his running game is also good and can develop in time. He's 24, maybe 25 years of age. So he's maybe not there yet. I don't think he's ready to replace Cherry Evans yet. And I hope to God he's actually from Queensland. I'm sure he is from Queensland because I made a video on it. But I think Braden Trindle could be in with a huge season at the Sharks if he's given the opportunities. So we will see how that goes for him. But to get into a prediction, this is going to be an extremely narrow one. But I'm going to go with the Warriors to win 1-12 points. Next up, we have the Storm versus the Panthers. What a blockbuster game this is. You cannot get more blockbuster than this. In my personal opinion, you have the Melbourne Storm with what I think is the best spine in the world. It doesn't mean that they all have the best individuals, but on paper, on balance, they have the best spine with Pappenhausen, Munster, Hughes and Grant. It is the best spine in the world. It could be better by putting Nathan Cleary in there and either Ponga or Walsh, whoever takes your fancy. But I also know that Pappenhausen could be as great as those guys. He is truly exceptional as the number 1. And same with Adam Reynolds that I said before, I just hope he gets a full year injury-free. I'd love to see it. He's such a fun player to watch. And the same, I didn't say it about Tom Trebojevic. I also hope that he has an injury-free season because These are world-class players that are so fun to watch. Pappenhausen is such an exciting player. I hope to God that this year just goes well for him. I really do. But they have Nick Meaney in that position, who is reliable enough if they need to put him there. And they've still got players like they've got Coates and Warbrick that can play on the wings as well if they have to. And there's a few of the youngsters as well, Anderson, and there's someone else I can't think of. But the Panthers will want to bounce back after the disappointing result against the Wigan Warriors. We can talk about controversy all day. Some people I know are instantly thinking, oh, just because you're a Pommy, you're thinking that, it's fine that Wigan won in the fashion that they did. I don't support Wigan, so I don't care. Either of them could have won it. All that I focused on for that is the fact that I think Wigan did a good job just to compete with the best in the world. That's all I'm focusing on. I've only seen the highlights back a couple times. Maybe some of the decisions weren't great, including the double movement. But you could have said that the markings for the Bevan French try that was disallowed was maybe onside. I don't care. I don't care whether they were robbed or not. I think the Panthers were still great. I think Wigan was still great. Simple as that. But they'll feel hard done by and they'll want to bounce back with a huge win against a massive opponent in Melbourne Storm. Both spines are incredible. I've been getting off track a little bit with this one, but just to get on with a prediction, another fairly narrow one, but I'm going to go with the Panthers to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Eels versus the Bulldogs. For me, this is always a big question mark. Simple as that. It is a big question mark because I talked quite positively about the Bulldogs on paper last season. And this game for me always throws up big problems. Even when the Eels have been favourites, the Bulldogs have still come out and won. There was a game a few years ago, there was a massive upset. Eels were 5th in the table. Bulldogs were last, dead last, with a poor attack, and then battered the Eels out of absolutely nowhere. It just came from nowhere. But the Bulldogs on paper, I really like them. I do really, really like them. And I think the Bulldogs, genuinely, with the players they've got, can compete for top 8. I think they can. You look at the players like Kikau, Preston, Marnie, Sexton, Burton, Crichton. That team overall, I think, is really, really strong. I think missing Avarillo for me, is a huge miss. If I was in charge of that, if I was the GM, I'm not letting him go. There's no way. So he's going to be a huge miss. But with the players they brought in, I think they did a really great job. So I think they can compete for top 8. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time, just getting used to having Stephen Crichton in there. Because whether he is going to play fullback, he might change from time to time, centre and fullback. But it will take a bit of time getting used to. But there are some really skillful, intelligent players there that can push them to compete for top 8. And this against an Eels team that can be very inconsistent. Unbelievably inconsistent. They are the worst team to bet on. Because they will happily lose a game that they're favourites in. And happily ruin a bet for you when they're not the favourites. So it's difficult for me to say which way this is going to go. I am leaning towards the Eels just because of their continuity in the spine. And essentially, players like Gutherson and Moses are going to be the most important factors for me. Moses, mostly so, because him at his best he is one of the best game changers in the NRL. And he's got an incredible kicking game. So that's the way I'm looking at the moment. So to predict this game, I'm going to go with the Eels to win 1 to 12 points. Next up, we have the Titans versus the Dragons. This one, for me, is slightly more comfortable to look at. And I think most of you know which way I'm looking at the moment. But I'll start off with the Titans. They had some really, really strong depth in their spine last year. And it's going to be interesting to see how things go for them this year, because they have really high skill, intelligent players, and some of those players are very young and have a lot of potential. Tanner Boyd took a real big step up last year, and that would have been massively helped by the fact that Kieran Foran is now part of that team. Jaden Campbell, we need to see another big step up from him. He can be great. Simple as that. He can be great. But we just need to see a bit more. We've seen plenty of sparks and plenty of moments where he's been good. And he's had great moments. I think even, bang average players, they've had great moments. Everyone will at some point in their careers. But I know that he can be great. AJ Brimson can be great. So it's, how are they going to organise this spine? And they have Verrills in there at number 9 as well. And he's a very intelligent, reliable player. So, yeah, I've got to give him his props. But the forward pack of the Titans is also huge. They've got Fotuaika, they've got Fafita, Fa'asu Malawi, of course. So the Titans are also a team that can absolutely compete for the top 8. On paper, they look really strong. But it's just about putting it together. They had some great moments early on last season, and they looked like a team that could absolutely challenge for top 8 and be a firm top 8 team, but then they just let it kind of slip off. So I think they dealt with some suspensions and injuries. I think they had Boyd out, Verrills out at one point, but overlapped with Brimson being out and maybe even Campbell. So they had a lot of issues to deal with last year, but even at times when they were available back in towards last season, it slipped a bit. And that probably would have just been that momentum shift midway through because of all the issues that they had. But on paper, my God, the Titans are a really strong team. Looking at the Dragons, though, Flanagan, meh. That's my reaction to that. Meh. I would rather have kept, personally, I'm not a Dragons fan, but I would have preferred to have kept Jaden Sullivan. It is Jaden Sullivan, isn't it? I think I got that right. I would have kept him, personally. But they're another team that has exciting individuals that can create moments from nothing. I think it's important that they've still got Blake Lawrie in there. He's a big player. Zach Lomax, for me, the big kid, can be an exciting player and brings up some hugely incredible moments from individual play. Like some of the assists that he can pull off with like these crazy passes he does. And some individual moments, Lomax can be absolutely brilliant at his best. But it's just, how often are we going to get that? He is one that can elevate this team. Lawrie through the middle can elevate this team to dominate through the middle. Ben Hunt can only do so much. And he was putting a lot of Dally M winner performances early last season. And in the middle of the season as well. But it needs to be backed up by everybody else. What kind of season we're going to get from Sloan as well? You know, he was being hyped up a lot at the start of last season. We need to see more from him. So I don't think they're necessarily going to challenge for top 8. I don't know if they're going to be able to put up much of a challenge against the Titans. So to go with a prediction for this one, I think it's understandable if you went for a Titans 13+, but I think that's just a bit too much. Until we know how the Titans really feel this year, until we know how the Dragons really feel, maybe they've made a big step up everywhere, we'll have to hold off on that one, I think. So I'm going to go with the Titans to win 1 to 12 points. Finally, for round 1, we have the Dolphins versus the Cowboys. This one is a really interesting one for me. Because I think the Dolphins, you know, nobody was expecting that kind of competitiveness that they had early on. No one was expecting it. They had great individuals, of course, but to kind of have a team that's new thrown into the scenario, like they're basically a promoted team in a promotion and relegation type league, they held their own extremely well. Then, unfortunately, the problems started coming. They were missing Sean O'Sullivan. They were missing Jeremy Marshall-King. They had some injuries in the forwards as well. But provided they have a really healthy season, There's 3 big players now in that team, which is massive for the Dolphins. One is Tom Flegler, who I can now remember the name of after finally researching it. So Tom Flegler is going to be a massive inclusion to that forward pack. Could easily do 80 minutes if you ask him to. My only concern with him is a bit hot-headed from time to time. Could throw up a few sin bins here and there. That's my only problem with Flegler. Other than that, he's fantastic through the middle. Second, Jake Averillo. Quality player. Is the type to create something from nothing. You give him a bit of space, he is gone. Fantastic inclusion to this team. And third, Herbie Farnworth, exactly the same. Can create something out of nothing. One of the best in the league to do it. The Dolphins have a really exciting team. Really exciting team. That spine of... Who would they have? They'd have Hamiso Tabuai-Fidau at 1. They'd have probably Katoa at 6, more for the future as well. Possibly Milford starting, but Katoa at 6 and then for the future. Sean O'Sullivan at 7, who will get better year after year and has a great kicking game. I think he's also very reliable and underrated. And then Marshall King at 9. Then on the edges, you have Averillo and Farnworth. I really like that team. I really, really like it. Looking at the Cowboys, though, their team on paper is brilliant. Drinkwater at fullback is one of the most underrated fullbacks. Like, people know his quality, but some people were really criticising him last year. It's fine to criticise players, I get it. You know, I've done it before and I will do it again. But we know how incredible he can be. Tom Dearden makes a great leap year after year. Chad Townsend is a really solid number 7. Sometimes I have an issue with his kicking game. Like, sometimes it's a little bit off on the last tackle. But for the most part, it's fine. But that Cowboys team is just really strong overall. They're going to be missing Peteku on the right centre position. But I think they'll be completely fine. I think this will be an absolutely incredible game. Possibly best game of the round, actually. I mean, I like the Storm Panthers one. That'll be extremely close. Warriors Sharks. But for me, there's something about this team that screams fireworks. Defensively, I think they'll both be solid for the most part this season. But these two teams in attack will be so fun to watch. So I'm going to go with a very high scoring game on this one, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys to win 1-12 points. So to recap my predictions for round 1, I'm going to take the Seagulls and Broncos 1-12 points, the Knights 13+, and then the Warriors, Panthers, Eels, Titans, and Cowboys all to win 1-12 points. In terms of winners' confidence, I'm only at about 60%, just because the Rabbitohs could win, the Roosters could be a little bit better than the Broncos and win, the Sharks could beat the Warriors, Storm could beat the Panthers, Bulldogs could beat the Eels, and honestly the Dolphins could beat the Cowboys as well. There's too many question marks for me at the moment, but 60% on winners' confidence. In terms of margin confidence, I'm 95%. If I get all the winners right, I can't see any other margin than that. There's no way that... I mean, maybe the Titans beat the Dragons 13+. I think that's probably where I'm missing 5% there. But for me, all those games could be extremely close. It's a great round 1 for the NRL. Well, that's my recap for my round 1 predictions. So that's going to be it for this video. If you have any predictions, please let me know in the comments down below. Hopefully we start off with 8 out of 8. If you want to see any bets that I've got on for this week, you can check out my TikTok page at KineticRL, or just search Kinetic Rugby League, or click the link in the description down below and that'll take you to my TikTok page and you can see the specific bets that I'll be placing week in, week out, which will include Super League games as well. And you can watch my predictions videos for Super League to get an idea of where I'm at with those. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you next time.